All right, we're on to our next segment of the brain. We're going to do the brain stem. So that's you got the spinal cord coming up, coming up, coming up, and then boom, turns into the brain stem. So that's the transition from the spinal cord to the brain. All right, so it's going to start right here. We're going to be focusing on this region in here, the brain stem. We're also going to do the cerebellum. All right, so the first region of the brain stem we're going to talk about is this region right here. So you want to color this in. On yours, I'm guessing that I removed the image won't have this half of the cerebellum because I'm gonna in a little bit I'm gonna cut this in half. So this area right here, that's called the medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata. So go ahead and highlight or color that in with whatever color you want. And I gotta get rid of my pen. Boom, boom, boom. All right. So that's called the medulla oblongata. That's spelled right. I think so. All right. Medulla oblongata. All right. Its functions. It controls blood pressure, and it does that by controlling the force of heart rate and also the diameter of blood vessels. So it can increase and decrease blood pressure. Also has to do with the heart beating, the force of the heartbeat. It controls the rhythm of your breathing. So it has a breathing center that controls the rhythm of your breathing. Also, all three of these, so we're going to have the medulla, we're going to have the pons, and we're going to have the midbrain. All three of these contain what's called the reticular formations. Let me go ahead and type that in before I forget. Reticular formations. And the reticular formations are important because, one, they have what's called the RAS, the reticular activation system, which arouses you from sleep. So that's what wakes you up in the morning. Your RAS, reticular formations, that arouses you from sleep. The reticular formations also filter out like unnecessary stimuli. So if you're in a room and maybe a fan is blowing or the AC is on or maybe a clock is going tick 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 tick, well, after a while you're not going to hear the AC blowing or you're not going to hear that clock going tick 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 because the reticular formations in your brain filters out that useless information. Another thing that you're going to want to add to your diagram, look at the anterior view, the front view. Here's the medulla right here. Grab my pen. All right, so you got these bulges right here. These are called, they're pyramidal tracts, or they're just called pyramids. These are motor fibers that are coming down. So this is on the right side of your body. So this is coming down from the right primary motor cortex and the right cerebrum. And they're coming down and then they're gonna go into the spinal cord. But this is where, let me go ahead and type it over here. This is where it's called the decussation. Oh, am I going to be able to spell this? Decussation of pyramids or the pyramidal tracts. And what that is all that means is you have these efferent fibers coming down, these are axons of motor neurons. They're coming down. And in the medulla, this is where they actually decussate, which means cross over. So neurons that originated in the right cerebral cortex, the right primary motor cortex, are going to cross over and they're going to go to the left side of the body. And same thing, I can't change colors, I don't think. Let's see. Oh, I can go blue. And then same thing over here. So these motor motor neurons that originate in the left cerebral cortex, the left primary motor cortex, they're gonna cross over here. So that's where the left ends up controlling the right side of the body, and the right side of the brain ends up controlling the left side of the body. All right, that's called the decussation of the pyramids. All right, so that was the medulla. All right, before we move on from the medulla, forgot a couple things. So once again, here's the medulla right down here, the first part of the brain stem. Just above that, you have the pons. Here's going to be the midbrain right up here, just below the thalamus, and then the pons right here in between. And you have the cerebellum back here posterior. All right, so we went over some of the medulla's functions. Contains the reticular formations that helps arouse you from sleep, sets the rhythm of your breathing, the in and out, the force of the heartbeat, and also the diameter of the blood vessels, which helps to regulate blood pressure. But also has reflex centers in here inside the medulla for reflexes like coughing and sneezing and vomiting, hiccups, yawning, all reflexes like that. The the nuclei or the centers are all located right here inside the medulla oblongata. All right, so now on to the next part of the brain stem. So we just did the medulla. It's right here. I have now completed, pretty much completed our mid sagittal cut. I missed the spinal cord down here, but so now I've cut it directly in half. So in the last image, we had the other half of the medulla. We had the other half of the pons. We also had the cerebellum. We had the other half. So now I've done a complete mid sagittal. All right, so the pons, that's the next one. So the medulla is down here. Now we have the pons. So it's going to be the bulgy area directly anterior in front of the cerebellum. So we're talking about this area right here. So this is the pons, Pons. So go ahead and color in that on your brain diagram. And what's the pons? What are some jobs of the pons? It also has a respiration or breathing center. But remember, the medulla set like the rhythm of the breathing, the in and the out, the rhythm of the breathing, where the pons controls the depth of the breathing. It has what's called the pneumotaxic area. Doubts you'll need to know that inhibits the amount of air that you can breathe in. So it stops your inhalation before it expands your lungs too much. And then it's got the apneustic center that does the opposite. It wants you to breathe larger, breathe in more air. So both those work together to control the depth of your breathing, to control how much air you actually take in per breath. So that's one of the important uh, features of the pons. Another one is it's a direct connection to the cerebellum back here. So here's the cerebellum. So let me get rid of this. All right, so now we have the cerebellum back here connected to the brainstem through the pons. The cerebellum is important. It's like it's like really important for like athletes and stuff. It allows you to know where your body is in space. So you can kind of imagine an Olympic diver, and they're on that high dive way up there, and then they're doing flips and spins and twisting all through the air, knowing where their body is at, and then they enter the water just perfectly. Well, how do they do that? How do they coordinate all those motions and even know where they're at in space? Well, that's what the cerebellum does. So I know the primary motor cortex is the ones that initiates your skeletal, your muscle movements, but it's the cerebellum that kind of smooths it all out. You know, it makes you a good dancer, makes you a good athlete. It smooths all those and coordinates all those muscle movements together, in a way that kind of makes sense. So that's the cerebellum. All right, one more thing I wanted to show you on this cerebellum real quick. I almost forgot. This will probably might be on a test. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm probably gonna misspell it, but let me try my best. It's a feature inside the cerebellum. It's called the arbor Vitae vitae. I think that's arbor. Arbor Day is like tree day. Vitae means I think it's life in Latin. So it means tree of life, and you can see it here. This is white matter inside the cerebellum. So you can see that this white matter branches out to form what looks like a white tree inside of the cerebellum. And that white matter in there is called the arbor vitae. All right, the last part of the brain stem, I removed the cerebellum. So the last part's going to be located right up here. So this is the thalamus. This area right here is the thalamus, hypothalamus. Here's your pituitary gland. So just inferior to the thalamus and just superior to the pons, you have this area right here. So go ahead and color that in. That's called the midbrain. Midbrain. All right, so some things that the midbrain is responsible for. Uh, well, first let's do this. Let me go ahead and go this. I get rid of my pen. Rid of that. Let's go over here. All right, so in the back of the midbrain, you got these bumps, and I cut the midbrain in half, so I did a mid sagittal, so that half of it would have been over here, but I deleted it. So here you got what's called the inferior colliculus. Both of them together make the inferior colliculi, and this filters out auditory information. So stimulation you get from your ears, sound, comes through here, your inferior colliculus. And this also gives you your startle reflex. So Halloween, somebody comes behind you and says, boo. You thank your midbrain. That's what ooh, that makes you kind of jump and get kind of frightened. So that's the inferior. I don't think you're going to need to know the inferior colliculi, but just know it filters, it sorts auditory information before it sends it back up to the cerebrum. And here you got the superior colliculus. Put them both together, you get superior colliculi, and this sorts out visual information. So, for example, if you're tracking like a bird flying in the sky, and your eyes are able to track that bird to follow that bird along, well, that's what this does. That's what the superior colliculus does. So the midbrain is important for processing both visual and auditory information. Uh, what else? And it's also got obviously it's got tracks. It's got you can't see them here because I cut it off. You can probably see it over here, right here. Let's see. Yeah, cerebral peduncle. This is the right one. There was a left one over here, and those are just motor fibers that are traveling down towards the spinal cord. So it also plays a role. It's got motor fibers that go through it from the cerebrum, going down towards the spinal cord, in order to make movements with the muscles. All right, so that's the midbrain.